National Guard troops hit Los Angeles streets as immigration protests enter a third day, sparking more arrests after at least 10 detained on Sunday. Governor Gavin Newsom calls the deployment unlawful and urges President Trump to pull troops immediately. Ukraine says Russia fired a record 479 drones in a single night, calling it one of the largest aerial barrages of the war. Kyiv claims it shot down 460 drones and 19 out of 20 missiles as Moscow continues to reject ceasefire calls. Top US and Chinese officials meet in London to revive a Geneva Pact and cool escalating tensions over tariffs and export controls. With rare earths and supply chains at stake, the talk signals a critical push to stabilize global markets after months of trade turmoil. President Trump's new travel ban takes effect Monday, blocking entry from 12 countries, mostly in Africa and the Middle East, to protect national security. The order also imposes partial restrictions on 7 more countries, though exemptions apply for diplomats, athletes, and certain work visas. Tehran has slammed Israel's interception of Gaza-bound aid vessel as piracy, saying the incident occurred in international waters. Iran's foreign ministry called the raid an assault on international activists and a violation of global law. NATO Chief Mark Rutte is urging a 400% increase in air and missile defenses, warning that Russia's air attacks in Ukraine show the need for stronger protection. He says NATO also needs thousands more tanks and millions of artillery shells to meet modern threats. Tehran warns it will scale back cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog if an anti-Iran resolution is passed this week. The IAEA should not expect friendly cooperation, says an atomic energy spokesman ahead of Monday's board meeting. French President Emmanuel Macron kicked off the UN Ocean Summit in Nice, declaring that Greenland, Antarctica, and the deep ocean are not for sale. He called for an international moratorium and deep-sea mining, saying it's a necessity to protect the planet. In the latest turn of events in the Israel-Gaza standoff, Israeli Defense Minister Yisrael Katz has praised the military for what he called a quick and safe interception of Gaza-bound boat. He also said that the passengers on board will be shown footage of Hamas' deadly October 7th attack under his direct orders. French President Emmanuel Macron has called for the immediate release of 6 French nationals detained after Israeli forces intercepted a Gaza-bound aid vessel. France's Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has confirmed that diplomatic efforts are underway to facilitate their swift return home. Here's what France's Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot had to say.
Nous nous sommes exprimés très clairement sur ce sujet. Nous avons 6 ressortissants français à bord de ce voilier. Nous avons pris la tâche avec les autorités israéliennes en amont pour prévenir tout incident. Nous avions d'ailleurs alerté les membres de cet équipage, ou en tout cas les ressortissants français, sur les risques auxquels ils s'exposaient. Puis depuis l'arraisonnement de ce navire par les autorités israéliennes, nous avons demandé à pouvoir exercer ce que l'on appelle la protection consulaire, c'est-à-dire la protection par les agents du consulat français sur place vis-à-vis de nos ressortissants. Nous souhaitons pouvoir entrer en contact avec eux dès qu'ils rentreront sur le territoire israélien pour pouvoir leur permettre de rentrer dès que possible sur le territoire national.
Footage released by the Freedom Flotilla Coalition shows activists on board the yacht Madeleine with their hands raised as Israeli troops boarded the ship. The video, widely shared online, captures the moment the vessel was intercepted in international waters. The British-flagged yacht was carrying 12 passengers, including climate activist Greta Thunberg, and a small load of symbolic humanitarian supplies such as rice and baby formula. The vessel was attempting to breach Israel's long-standing naval blockade on Gaza. Israeli officials confirmed that their forces had taken control of the boat and that all crew members are safe. They described the voyage as a propaganda show in support of Hamas and said the aid will be transferred through official channels. The Freedom Flotilla Coalition said the mission was designed to draw international attention to the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Lastly, families of hostages held in Gaza protested in Tel Aviv today, urging a deal to free their loved ones and end the fighting. Since the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack, 55 hostages remain in Gaza, some alive and some dead. Now we have guests joining us. Anat Berstein-Reich, he's a president in Israel Asia Chamber of Commerce. He's joining us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you for joining us today. What are the diplomatic ramifications of Israel's interception of a British-flagged aid vessel in international waters, especially with high-profile figures like Greta Thunberg on board?
First, it's a she, not a he. So good evening.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So when you're asking about a ramification, I don't see much ramification in a sense that it was clear to the vessel, to this yacht, that they will be intercepted and they will be detained. They not really thought that they will reach Gaza. They wanted to create awareness. They definitely created awareness. We call it the selfie boat because that's what they did in the past few days, posting selfies on social media to create awareness. And they did create awareness. They wanted the humanitarian aid that they carried to reach Gaza. And Israel, of course, confirmed that this aid will reach Gaza. So it ended peacefully. They will be sent back to their countries, I believe, in the next couple of hours. And this incident will be over. And when you were talking about the naval blockade that Israel imposing on Gaza, first, it's a legal blockade because what happened otherwise, ammunition will reach Gaza, will reach the Hamas, and no one wants Hamas to get more ammunition because they're using it against Israel, against their own people, and we need to protect ourselves, and this is why there is a naval blockade. It has nothing to do with humanitarian aid that is going now to Gaza. In the past 2 weeks, thousands of trucks have reached Gaza, and food and other supply is given to the population there. I'm not saying that it's perfect. There are obstacles, including Hamas, that is trying to take over those trucks or blocking them or even shooting or threatening these people to and trying to take it from there. But Gaza is getting humanitarian aid, and again, this yacht was trying just to create awareness, which they did, but awareness exists anyway, so I don't see a real reason for this yacht to go and try to reach Gaza.
And what would you say to those who might argue the opposite, that this was not for social media's attention and this was genuinely for people's aid to reach Gaza Strip?
I think that it's a bit an innocent reply, I would say, because it was a yacht, a small yacht with baby food, which is reaching Gaza via roads on the trucks. So it's just a naive action by Greta and her friends. If you want to give humanitarian aid, there are ways to do it. There is now the Gaza Humanitarian Fund that is delivering food supply to the Gazan population. They have 4 or 5 centers in Gaza itself to give the population food and other supply. So if they wanted to, they could ship it to this fund, and they would distribute it. So again, it was just a propaganda, as you rightly said earlier, and nothing more than that.
And shifting focus back to international reactions, how might France's strong response to the detention of its nationals influence Israel's handling of future activist missions aimed at challenging the Gaza blockade?
Israel is very clear about treating flotillas or other vessels that are trying to reach Gaza. As long as Hamas is controlling Gaza, as long as Hamas wishes to use ammunition and trying to buy ammunition and get ammunition, we cannot afford an access. And that's why we are persistent in this naval blockade. Let me take you back to 2010, the big flotilla called Marmara that left Turkey, and it was filled with ammunition. And once we took over this, we could show the world that that was the purpose of this vessel. So very few carry real humanitarian aid. Most, if we were to open this naval blockade, you would see that a lot of those vessels will carry ammunition, and we all want peace in the region and not more ammunition to reach Hamas. And as to France, as you said, those passengers of the yacht will be released soon, and there is nothing special here. They knew that it's not allowed. They came and went on this vessel knowing that they will be detained from Israel. It's naive to think that they really thought they'll get into Gaza. So nothing, they were treated very nicely. They were given food, they were taken care of, and now they'll be sent to their country. So no diplomatic incident in this regards.
And in case further and more actions or more people try to follow the suit, such as this ship was, could this trigger broader condemnation or legal challenges?
It's happening all the time. And even the UN confirmed that such a naval blockade is a legal thing that Israel is doing. So we're facing those, I wouldn't call them lunatics, but people that really mean good, but eventually they don't do the right thing. If they want to give humanitarian aid to Gaza, there are ways to do it via organizations, not just going on a boat and thinking that on a small boat then they can carry real humanitarian aid. So I don't think that it's a serious thing, and it will continue. And we saw it along the past 2 years that those vessels are trying to reach Gaza, they're intercepted, and it ends there. I hope that people will understand that it doesn't make any difference, but for some awareness that they create, of course, by you and me talking about it now on prime time.
Thank you very much, Anat Berstein-Reich. She's a president of Israel Asia Chamber of Commerce. She joined us from Tel Aviv. Now we move on to our next story. Russia has said that the first stage of prisoner exchange with Ukraine has been completed. Russia said it returned a group of prisoners, all aged under 25, from Ukraine in the first stage. This comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that a fresh prisoner exchange with Russia is ongoing and will take place in several rounds over the coming days, and announced that Kyiv received the first group of captives from Russia. Meanwhile, one person has been reported dead and several wounded after a Ukrainian missile strike hit a recreation facility in Russia's Kursk region. According to the region's acting governor, Alexander Hinstein, this comes as Russia says it has taken more territory in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has stated that part of their reason to push into the Ukrainian region includes creating a buffer zone. On the other hand, tensions escalated after Russia launched overnight drone attacks across Ukraine targeting multiple regions. Ukraine also reported what it calls the biggest overnight bombardment of the war to date. Its Air Force said Russia launched 479 drones and 20 missiles overnight, targeting mainly central and western regions. Ukrainian defenses reportedly intercepted 277 drones and 19 missiles. Some strikes landed in Kyiv and Rivne, injuring at least one civilian, according to local officials. Meanwhile, Ukrainian special forces claimed responsibility for a strike on a Russian airfield deep inside Russian territory. According to Ukraine's military, the raid targeted the Savaslyka airbase in the Nizhny Novgorod region, approximately 400 miles from the Ukrainian border. The operation allegedly damaged 2 fighter jets used for launching ballistic missiles. Now we have guest Professor Veselin Popovsky joining us. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Laws School. Thank you for joining us today. What does the scale and frequency of the prisoner exchanges indicate about the current state of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, these are good news, is that prisoners of war are exchanged between Russia and Ukraine. This is the second round, as you correctly, Asuma, mentioned. Hopefully there will be more. And effectively, under the international humanitarian law, every prisoner of war needs to be exchanged. There is nothing surprising here. I wouldn't call it progress in negotiations. These negotiations can happen between the generals on the ground. They don't require high-level political involvement even. But because they are brought into the Istanbul negotiation table, somehow my feeling is that the Russian side wants to present that as involvement in peace negotiations, which obviously is not. What we see daily from Russia, but also from Ukraine, is fighting. The difference is that Russia strikes civilian targets in the big cities, and night after night they continue with those indiscriminate targeting of civilian objects, which are violations of international humanitarian law, which are war crimes by any standard, whereas what Ukraine is doing is targeting simply military objects. Every strike on Russian territory so far has been a military object, and what Ukraine is doing is fighting under the normal, legitimate conduct of war, which Russia does not. Russia does not negotiate, apart from those prisoners exchange. As I said, they are minimal and they are not part of peace negotiations. Russia rejected any ceasefire, including temporary 30-day ceasefire, something that Ukraine, United States, all European countries demanded over 3 months. No response to that from Moscow. If Moscow accepted a ceasefire, they would not have suffered such huge military losses all over Russia. All the airplanes and strategic ballistic airplanes and all other hits done by Ukraine would have not happened if Russia accepted a ceasefire.
And how effective is the concept of a buffer zone militarily and politically for Russia in Ukraine's contested regions?
Again, that's another game by Russians. They always come with something new which doesn't make any sense, and every next nonsense, such as the buffer zone, doesn't bring any clear. It's difficult to answer even such question because it's illogical and doesn't make any sense. Effectively, what Russia is doing is trying to show willingness to talk, and they always come with another formula. Sometimes they say, let's have a high-level meeting, which they didn't go to. Vladimir Putin doesn't go for a high-level meeting. He sent a very low-level delegations. Then they start talking about some buffer zone, again, without any details. Then at some point they started talking about a memorandum to list the interests of both sides. And these are very clear from statements. Again, nothing new. So Russia wants to continue the fighting and the killing of civilians primarily, because there is nothing else they do. They don't advance much on the ground. They can capture a little village here and a little village there, but nothing significant in terms of military advance. In fact, the War Institute calculated that with such progress in advances, Russia needs 200 years to capture Ukraine. Again, we see how insufficient is everything on the battlefield. But in the meantime, Russia continues targeting civilians with the aim of demoralizing the Ukrainians, which is absolutely wrong. Ukrainians only get more unified and more committed to survive when there are those hits on civilian targets. So unfortunately, what needs to be done, and very many already realize that, including the United States administration, is to increase the sanctions on Russia. There is already a draft bill in the Congress, bipartisan between both Republicans and Democrats, Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham bill, to increase sanctions and to also impose sanctions on secondary sanctions, impose sanctions on countries that continue to trade with Russia, import oil and gas in other countries, but also to increase support for Ukraine, and that's also something important. And most of the countries in the world already do that. They continue supporting Ukraine and they continue sanctioning Russia. And what they also should do is stop negotiations with Putin. So 3 messages: increase sanctions on Russia, increase support for Ukraine, and stop negotiations with Putin. If all the countries do that, this is the way out of all this tragedy.
Thank you very much, Professor Veselin Popovsky, for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next story. French President Emmanuel Macron has told world leaders that it is a necessity for nations to impose a moratorium on deep-sea mining while speaking at the 2025 United Nations Ocean Conference. World leaders, scientists, and advocates have arrived for the conference today in the southern French city of Nice. The summit is meant to cover climate change, pollution, biodiversity, and making humanity's access to marine resources more sustainable. The French president has declared that the deep oceans, Greenland, and Antarctica are not for sale, while UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the deep sea must not turn into the Wild West as nations negotiate contentious new rules for seabed mining. Here's what the UN Secretary General had to say.
The deep sea cannot become the Wild West. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in an age of turmoil, but the resolve I see here gives me hope. Hope that we can turn the tide, that we can move from plunder to protection, from exclusion to equity, from short-term exploitation to long-term stewardship.
The conference, which is being held from 9th to 13th June, is co-hosted by France and Costa Rica. Reportedly, one of the stated goals of the French government is to convince enough states to ratify the High Seas Treaty adopted by the United Nations in 2023 for it to come to effect. Here's what the French president has said.
Si la Terre se réchauffe, l'océan, quant à lui, est en ébullition. Nos scientifiques nous disent des faits que nous n'aurions pu imaginer, des canicules au sein même de nos océans. Et comme la mer monte, en plus du feu, c'est la submersion qui nous guette. C'est pourquoi cette mobilisation est une nécessité. Aujourd'hui à Nice, nous avons plus de 120 pays, Plus de 50 chefs d'État et de gouvernement, plus de 30 chefs d'État, chefs d'organisations internationales qui ont fait le déplacement. Et ça vient d'être évoqué, 100 000 personnes qui participeront à cette conférence avec des milliers d'événements partout organisés. C'est inédit pour nos océans. C'était essentiel car l'océan nous relie tous au sein d'un seul et même écosystème.
Now let's hear it more from our guest, Des Magic. He's an environmental activist joining us live from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you for joining us today. What are the main challenges facing global agreement on a deep sea mining moratorium, and how likely is consensus during this conference?
The main challenge, again, is our unbridled desire for more profit, more money, no matter what. And the Secretary General of the United Nations spoke very clearly to that. He said that we can no longer be destroying the ocean. We have to be protectors, not destroyers, because the ocean is such an important ecosystem. It is what the earth relies on, the ocean and the forests. They are sequestering carbon dioxide. They're both giving off oxygen. Oh, and is it food? The amount of food that comes from the oceans? Or is it just regulating weather patterns? Where do you think all the water for so many of the lakes in the world come from? They are fed by the oceans. Oh, and not to mention rain. So this is just most unfortunate that they're actually having opposition to people who want to do deep sea mining that they know categorically, without any trace of doubt, that this deep sea mining of the ocean beds is causing havoc for the ocean ecosystems, which are quite delicate. They're like water forests on the beds of the ocean, and they're coral reefs and different other places that so much of the ocean life depends on. So it is most unfortunate. They have absolutely no right to argue against that. And as the French president said, we must preserve a very, very large portion of our ocean. It's part of our Earth's delicate life support system. So how can you justify damaging your life support system, no matter how much money you're going to make?
And indeed, what role does the High Seas Treaty play in protecting biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions, and where does it stand in terms of ratification?
Yes, it's to ratify this treaty. It's coming on. It's very, very encouraging because it's fairly recently that the United Nations has been pushing for this. You know, they say out of sight, out of mind, you know, it's just water, it's under the water, you know, we try to ignore it for so long, and rightfully so. We concentrated a lot on ensuring that we try our best to protect the various ecosystems on the Earth's surface, okay? That's particularly the forests and so on, which are essential as well. But now with the further research that's been done, we're beginning to really appreciate the importance of these oceans. And it's encouraging to see that the United Nations, especially under the leadership of Antonio Guterres, who has been sounding the alarm without any qualms whatsoever, telling humanity that mankind is waging war against nature and this is suicidal. He used those exact words in 2015, and he's even using more strong phrases now. So it's encouraging to see under him that these treaties are coming up. I do believe that there is beginning to be enough pressure because in different parts of the world, they're feeling the effects of the climate change that had been predicted decades ago, particularly in France, who in November last year, they experienced a type of rainfall in Valencia, well, close to there anyway, in Spain. They experienced this kind of rainfall that place was overwhelmed. 1 year's rain fell in 8 months. So they're seeing it in different parts of Europe. So it's good that it is taking place there. And I'm optimistic that the treaties a good number of them will be ratified. Whether they'll be adhered to is another matter. And that's why the people of the world, especially people like India and like Nigeria in Africa, we are very, very vulnerable because we have low-lying coasts, and already our coastlines are being impacted by the global warming that's affecting the ocean. And if you're going to be killing off the plant life because of deep sea mining,